Hello and welcome to the NextPowerUp review summary of Stories: The Path of Destinies. This is a game by Spearhead Games and it's primarily a bit of a story orientated kind of, I guess it's got a few RPG elements, but it's mainly just sort of, story led, bit of hack and slash, isometric view and all that sort of stuff. So, and what this game kind of does is it takes a lot of very good things from various different types of games and just sort of makes them simple, makes them approachable, and just covers things in a really great way. Now, you might notice I have very black, dirty hands. It's because a printer ink exploded today, so you'll have to bear with that. But basically what this game is it has like a little talent system. It has a level up system, and the talent system is quite simplistic, to be fair. It's quite similar to, I guess, the original World of Warcraft talent system, if you remember that, where you have like a few different main things and you can choose one and you put so many numbers in one to unlock the next and stuff like that. And it's very similar to that. And so you've got sort of like your passive trees that increase your stamina or health, you've got your damaging trees, you've got your sort of utility stuff, and they're all quite small. And the way you unlock each tier of every sort of section of the talent tree is the game has these truths. Now, the whole purpose of the game is about replayability. The whole thing's all about replaying the game. And every time you complete the game and you uncover one of these four main truths, you'll then unlock the next tier of upgrade stuff. So it sort of progresses quite nicely. And a lot of the game is based around you're going through these pages of the book, and you'll have 4 or 5 pages that you'll go through every single time. And each time you choose one of 3 choices, sometimes one of 2 choices. And then those unlock alternative choices from there, and then those unlock alternative choices from there, depending on which one you choose throughout. And then when you complete it, you'll then have like a specific card that you'll get, the type of ending, the type of hero you've been. And the cool thing about this game is, now you might think, oh, if you're doing that over and over and over again, that's going to get pretty boring, monotonous, and repetitive. And, yeah, it's quite repetitive, but it's not boring or monotonous, because they do quite an awesome thing with the replayability thing, in that, depending on what decisions you choose, the next level will still be the same map, kind of, but the way you approach that map will be quite different, and sometimes they'll block off certain paths, they'll open up others, and there'll just be different starts and endings to those things. So each choice you make does actually make the game feel different, which is, it's one of those games, a lot of write-ups advertise. They go, oh, your decisions will affect the gameplay. In actual fact, they do fuck all, to be perfectly honest. And it's just one of the biggest bullshit choices to write of a game ever. And so few games actually do it correctly and actually make anything a difference. It's sort of, kind of empty and shallow. Now, the game does kind of almost go the full whack, in that your options and your decisions of those options do change the way that maps are developed, the way that you end the game. Yes, there is a strict sort of format, sort of like a linear-ish thing that it follows, but a lot of things do change, so the replayability doesn't feel too repetitive, and you do feel like you actually want to discover all of these different things, because when you finish it, you have this list of cards and you've got the 4 truths, and if you want to, you can aim for those truths, or if you want to, you can try and fill up all of these cards by following different storylines and approaching things in different ways. And it's actually pretty cool. It's quite compelling. It's a good way to get people to play your game excessively. The game overall is actually quite simple. Like, combat is simple, movement is simple, maps quite simple, the way you choose to do things is quite simple, but at the same time they can sort of evolve into being more challenging. The more truths, the more of those 4 main truths you uncover, the more difficult the game gets, and the more times you play through, the more complicated the enemies are, the larger the groups of enemies are, and and the nice thing is the enemies are mixed up, so you won't get the same group of enemies each time. If you die and you come back, you'll get a slightly different group next time, and so it progresses quite nicely. I think that the difficulty curve throughout this game is bang on, absolutely perfect for a story orientated title. I'm not saying it's cripplingly hard, massively challenging, and people who like roguelikes or whatever are going to be totally into this, and it's like hell on earth mode in Diablo 2. But I think it's a story orientated game. It's there to be entertaining and tell a story, and so I think the difficulty curve is perfect for that type of game, which is pretty great. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed myself with the whole game. The different story forks are actually pretty cool, and each time I sort of uncovered a new thing, because sometimes you'll play through and you'll get certain options, but then the next time you play through you'll uncover these other random different options which have very wild results, and you might think, oh, I've done that thing before, there's no point in doing it again, but it is worth doing it again, because if you do that sort of fork, choose that path in the fork, and then do something different this time, then the result could be completely different, and you can end up just discovering some very strange things. And the story did take some turns that I didn't quite expect a lot of the time. And as I said, a lot of it has some complementary elements from different types of games. The combat system is very reminiscent of Batman, even though it's an isometric RPG, I guess. And it's got the talent system that's very reminiscent of WoW in that they're sort of mainly passives that don't give you any particular skills. But some of them are really awesome. The passives are fantastic, like the one that slows down time when you just clutch in a counter. It's fantastic. And the combat is really, really good. And so it takes all these nice little elements from different sorts of games and then just adds them together, simplifies them a little bit so they're easy to approach, but then sort of makes them a little bit more complex as the game goes through. So it's really, really quite good. I mean, it's quite entertaining. It's very much, I guess it is a bit of a casual game for people more sort of going to sit there, play on a remote control, just take it easy. But it just feels, it's entertaining. It's good fun. It's like super hot, it doesn't have to be complicated. Games can just be fun. And this is good. It's just nice. And the game, it looked absolutely fantastic. Like, this is probably one of the best looking games I've played in a very, very, very long time. And I know it doesn't look hyper realistic, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, the graphics don't look too different from Torchlight. But when you play the game, when you're in the game, when you're viewing those landscapes, even though the polygon count is pretty low, and yeah, it's got that sort of pastel-y color finish, when you're looking at everything and you're seeing all the effects that are going off in these massive landscapes in the background, it just feels really, really good. And the maps are surprisingly large. They are pretty huge. I mean, yeah, they are quite linear in the way that they're designed, and you can only go through these certain paths, and there's not a huge amount of paths. Most of them lead the same way. But the maps are just massive, and they look wonderful. So, the game is awesome. I mean, I haven't mentioned any negatives yet. There are some. But it's just fun. It's just a fantastic game. It looks great. It plays great. It's easy to jump into, and it gets complex and challenging for those that want a bit of a challenge. The few things that are a little bit of a nuisance is, the narrator. Kind of feel sorry for the narrator in a weird way, because the narrator plays a huge part in the entire game. He is narrating the story from start to finish, the whole way through the levels. It's got that Bastion vibe. Like I said, it borrows a lot of different things from a few games, and it borrows the narrating sort of aspect of Bastion, in that the narrator is constantly talking throughout everything that you're playing. He's doing the voices of loads of different characters and trying to make them sound legitly different, and he does manage to pull it off. But the one problem I have with the narration is it sort of goes up and down in terms of the age level. And to start off with, I was thinking, okay, this game has got a bit of a childish sort of fairy tale vibe about it, and that seems sensible. And that's fair enough. Whatever, if you're aiming your audience at that age, that's cool. I mean, it's a game that I guess I could see my nieces or nephews playing it, I guess. But then it sort of suddenly takes a more adult turn, occasionally, very occasionally. And then it will go from being sort of semi-adult and then just plunge down to cripplingly stupid, very childish, like extremely childish, sort of 4-year-old childish narration. And then it goes back up to these pop culture references to other games like StarCraft, and the fact that you're smashing open barrels and stuff like that. And yeah, some of the humor is pretty good. And I think I'm sort of going too far into the narration is bad thing, but 90% of the narration is fantastic. It tells the story wonderfully. I think the narrator does a great job throughout, and he has an important role and he does it well. It's just these tiny little bit percentages here and there, and these random little niggles where you're thinking to yourself, why did you do that? And I think it's not necessarily down to the narrator himself. He's got a pretty decent voice, to be honest. I think it's just down to the writing, and the writing's a little bit all over the place when it comes to just strange things, basically. The other thing is it has no video options. Well, it does have one or two. As I mentioned in the performance analysis, which you can see the link below for, there's no resolution supported above 1080p, which is a bit of a nuisance. The game does sort of scale up on your screen. However, if you Alt-Tab and then tab back in again, or if you have like dual monitors, then you end up with the massive borders, which is a bit of a nuisance. And to be honest, since I bought my 4K monitor, I've never come across a game that didn't allow you to scale it to 4K and just had that limit at 1080p. It's been ages. I thought that thing was just sort of gone now. Developers just added it in so that it didn't affect things. And of course, because there's a lack of video options, the VSync is forced, or there is a 60 FPS cap, I guess, is on VSync being forced. The other thing is the crafting system, which is relatively decent. You got a few different swords to play around with, and it gives you a little bit of a personal touch to the game, which is pretty good. But you know, there's a fair in sort of they're complementary systems. The crafting system is sort of complementary to the story aspect of the game and the RPG aspect of the game, and you know, making combat a little bit more interesting when you're consuming energy to set everything on fire with the fire sword, or freeze things with the freeze sword, or attack at twice the speed with the sword of the east or whatever. And it's really cool. I like the crafting system. I like the level up system. I like the little aspects that they've drawn in. But it feels like the crafting system is overall too soon. Like the first 2 swords you can level up to level 2, which is the maximum level. It's just level 2. I mean, that's not really much. You upgrade, you build it once and then you upgrade it and then it's done. And then, you know, I think I've played... After about 5 hours, I had all of the swords upgraded and built to level 2. And after that, you're just sort of collecting gems. And every time you collect gems, instead of stacking gems, they just level up ones if you've already got them. And I just felt like... You know, for the amount of time I'm going to be playing, it would be nicer if there were more upgrades that maybe didn't do as much improvement, but, you know, were more frequent. It just felt like, yeah, the upgrade system is nice and the gem system is pretty cool, but I just felt like there should have been a little tiny bit more, because there's this bizarre, like, curve of, you start off here, and your equipment, sword crafting or whatever, goes up here, like that. And then it sort of goes like that, and then you build something, and it just flatlines for ages, for hours and hours and hours and hours. You don't build or upgrade anything, and then suddenly you upgrade 2 things at once, and then it goes up again, and then it flatlines for ages. And so I don't know, I just felt like they could curve that out a little bit better. Maybe add 3 levels to each sword, and maybe reduce the material requirements for each upgrade so that it just curved out nicely. You know, they've done such a good job on all of the other aspects of the game, and I just felt like that was a little bit jarring. But you know, those are pretty minor things in the grand scheme of things. The game itself is massively entertaining. It looks fantastic. Combat is wonderful. Story is fantastic. I mean, you may not necessarily like the sort of fairy tale-ish vibe, but I thought it was pretty great. I thought it told a wonderful story, and it was an interesting way of dealing with story forks, and to build your game entirely upon replayability and going through the story and over again, and actually making it compelling to play each and every time. I thought they just did a great job of it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend people play it. I think overall you'll probably get like 8 hours play out of it. I uncovered all the truths and completed the game successfully after 7 hours. But again, I was missing about 12 alternative story cards, the cards that don't uncover truth, but, you know, choosing different paths. So there's plenty more of time playable compared to what I've played. So yeah, there's definitely quite a lot to it. And it just feels good the whole time. Like, my brother looked over my shoulder while I was playing, and he was like, that looks pretty cool. Does it have multiplayer? I was like, nah, sorry. And he was really disappointed because it looked really good, and it was the kind of game he liked. And the combat, oh man, I just can't describe it how much. The combat and the movement system is fantastic. Like, it's just silky smooth, and a real credit to the game and the developers, to be honest. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this review summary. I know I've waffled on about combat and movement a hell of a lot. But yeah, you can see the full written review down below, as well as the performance analysis, which is obviously lacking 4K chart because of no video options. Check us out on Saturday for our Next Week in Gaming episode, and next week on Thursday, I think our review is going to be for the Collider 2, which hasn't been announced a whole lot yet, but is available for press sort of messing around. So I should be playing that a little bit this weekend, hopefully. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this review, and we'll see you next week.
Cats always land on their feet.
Should head for the Imperial outpost. Yell Pino. You have to catch her.